Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sirius Report. Ken and Paul here is once again to talk about things that are going on geopolitically, financially, economically, and the like. One of the things that is taking place this weekend is Russia and Iran coming together to sign a comprehensive strategic agreement. This is going to have things such as economic, bipartisan trade, and also heavily focused on defense and security cooperation. Before this, I think we need to get into some of the details that lead up to this. And Paul, I want to thank you as always for being a part of the discussion. And I think the JCPOA is probably a good point to give some background before we get into the comprehensive agreement.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you as well for joining me today, Ken. It's always better when we do things together than doing things on our own. Yeah, I thought the Russia-Iran, this comprehensive cooperation agreement's important, but a little bit of background I want to put in with regards to Iran because there's an awful lot of statements coming out since Assad fled Syria and went to Russia. Oh, this is the end of Iran. Israel's going to invade Iran, and well, people have very short memories when we look at the military strikes that happened between the two countries when Israel struck virtually nothing in Iran and Iran took out strategic sites and made its Iron Dome defense system look as porous as you could imagine. And Iran militarily is far stronger than Israel. Anyway, okay, there's the issue of nuclear weapons, but that's an entirely different matter. But with regards to the reality of Iran as a nation, there are many things being currently said that are factually incorrect. But I wanted to talk first about the JCPOA very briefly, if anyone's not aware of it. That's the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. That was the Iran nuclear deal, effectively, and it was an agreement to limit Iran's nuclear program in return for sanction relief and other provisions. Now, that got finalized in July 2015. We're getting up to the 10th anniversary. And that was between Iran and the so-called P5+1, which was obviously China, France, Russia, the UK, and the US, and Germany, together with the European Union. Now, foolishly, Trump walked away from it in 2018. Very bad decision, because that opened the door then for Iran to go, well, you hadn't provided us any sanctions relief or very little in the 3 years since that agreement was finalized in 2015. So we'll go back to enriching more and more uranium to the point where we potentially could make a nuclear weapon. There was also the idiotic killing of Soleimani, which was in early 2020, a very bad decision again by Trump from a geopolitical perspective. And the world's changed drastically since Trump was in office previously. There's been the rapprochement as well between the Iranians and the Saudis as one example. And in essence, Iran's being welcomed back into the fold with across West Asia. And we can't forget, before we talk about Russia and Iran, to discuss the agreement that the Chinese and the Iranians put in place in March of 2021. But I thought I'd just stop there, Ken, so you can obviously discuss something rather than me just carrying on. We'll come to the China-Iran thing in a minute.
Yeah, what's pretty fascinating, of course, is when you take a look at Iran, the whole reason behind that started their push towards, nuclear energy was when they appealed to the West that they wanted some help putting in refineries so they could refine, their oil into other distillates. They were rejected in that, and of course, they needed to find a better energy source for the nation as a whole. So that's when they started looking into nuclear, and of course, the West, because they're reactionary and they don't have any real objectives on how to deal with nations, responded in kind and started doing the sanctions and all the propaganda. Oh, Iran's trying to make a nuclear weapon, blah, blah, blah. No, they had the opportunity to nip the nuclear program in the bud by just help facilitating some refineries, and they refused to do that. So a lot of what's going on with Iran what's going on in West Asia is the short-sightedness of the West, almost in essence to keep them in some type of vassalage or under some type of dominion. And we don't even know what the real control is, because if you go back to the end of the Soviet Union days and the Wolfowitz doctrine, everything that goes on in West Asia and everything goes on in Eurasia is simply about hegemony and dominance. It's not about actually developing these nations, fomenting type of partnerships, etc. It's simply about domination. And with that, you see why Iran has moved into Moscow's camp, into China's camp, because both of these, being a part of the multipolar world, are more interested in creating partnerships and development than they are about domination.
Obviously, if we go back, Iran and China signed this 25-year comprehensive cooperation agreement in March 2021, and the back end of 2022, it really started to move in earnest, where they signed 16 MOUs, memorandums of understanding, as part of this. And then in early 2023, they signed another 20, and Raisi, who was then the Iranian president, visited, and they signed bilateral cooperation documents in not just energy, but agriculture, trade, health, etc. And this related also to infrastructure, so transportation as part of that, industrial development. So there was projects like the high-speed rail link between Tehran and Mashhad, and investment in the Khomeini airport. And then there was also investment in the Mokran coast, which is in southeast Iran. And the purchase of Iranian oil was also mentioned in the documents. And it also entered into the realms of finance as well. And if you go to the back end of 2023, they signed a whole raft of agreements with respect to that. And this has been ongoing, and they keep developing this. It now includes maritime transport. There's commercial infrastructure being put in place, economic infrastructure, and the list goes on. So I'm not saying this was a blueprint, because it wasn't, because there's a lot of misunderstandings about the Russia-Iran agreement that was signed, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But I wanted to put the background with respect to China and Iran, because it's very important to not forget that Iran is backed by multiple partners, and China and Russia are just two of them. China's done a lot for them economically, Russia, and financially, but of course, Russia also with respect to not just some economic development, but a lot of industrial and military development. But I'll come on to Russia and Iran in a minute. Then obviously you can come in again, Ken.
Okay. The the fascinating thing about all of this is Russia and Iran are almost brothers in dire arms, for better lack of the term, because both of them had been focused by the U.S. and Europe in being sanctioned, in being labeled as the axis of evil. So it's only natural that they would come together. And one of the more fascinating things is, I think the West really, I mean, just the populations of the West, the same way that they have a misunderstanding of China, only hearing it through the lens of Western media, propaganda media, is Iran's the same way. They probably see Iran, similar to Afghanistan, not very developed, not just an energy company or country that wants to create terrorism around the world, etc. But the reality is they have been developing, and the drone technology is just one aspect. They have been developing superior technology to not only what is going on in West Asia. Obviously, we know what happened in when its response to Israel, but also I think it was, if I remember right, and this may have just been one of those propaganda things, but when the Reaper drones were first being used in Iraq, and they were captured by Iran, then they reverse engineered it And if that's the case, they have taken that technology and expanded it to much greater levels. And that's why a lot of the drone technology that's being used in the Ukraine conflict, both by Russia and sort of by the Houthis in their little escapade, that's coming from Iran development in a very short amount of time. So I think people really don't understand that Iran has the capacity to do what China did over the course of 20 to 30 years to become a economic juggernaut and lead the way, especially in West Asia as a whole, the same way Saudi Arabia wants to do by moving away from just simply energy to technology and other types of development. They're going to be a bulwark to West Asia and being technologically superior, or at least moving dominance forward. And by having Russia and China in their corner and having these agreements, both as security protection and as trade partners, this is going to accelerate Iran far more than, say, where Europe is expected to go in the next 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, just before we talk about this agreement, we know Iran produces huge amounts of energy, very cheaply, oil and gas. It has a lot of resources. It's also quietly one of the biggest gold holders in the world. Even if you look at the United States' official gold holdings, which I think are nonsense, but even if you take that figure, Iran has more gold than that, and by some margin. That's not something that's widely known. But Iran is also a very well educated country. It has a lot of very, very capable people. It's totally misunderstood by the West because of all the endless propaganda. But with regard to this agreement, this comprehensive cooperation agreement, there was everyone in the West was trying to make out it wasn't going to happen. It failed. There'd been a bust up between the Iranians and Putin, that somehow there was a falling out with the Iranian president Pezeshkian. All nonsense. And also, there's a couple of points I want to make one in a second, which completely just pulls the rug from under these kind of idiotic assertions. But first off, there was a recent statement that came out from the Iranian ambassador in Russia saying, look, this comprehensive cooperation agreement between the two countries that includes 47 articles is now basically at the point where it's ready to be signed shortly. Now, previously, Iran and Russia signed a similar agreement, which was approved by the Iranian parliament in 2001. The agreement was effectively valid for 20 years, ending in 2021. And this is where people went, oh, it ended. They've had no agreement in place. They've been discussing a new agreement for years. They can't reach an agreement. Well, they failed to understand one thing. The agreement included a provision that automatically extended the 2021 to 2026, so a 5-year extension, unless either party raised objections, which they didn't. Thus, the agreement is still in place, the old one, until 2026. But here's the point. The leaders of the two countries, and this was obviously Raisi and Putin, and obviously Raisi subsequently obviously passed away in that air disaster. But even Pezeshkian has concluded that the current agreement that is valid till 2026 is totally outdated, doesn't adequately address their bilateral relations. Because if you look at the expansion of their relations from 2001 to now, they've changed markedly, they've expanded hugely. And therefore, upon mutual consent, they went, we're going to have to upgrade this because the existing agreement that has been extended to 2026 is just outdated and isn't fit for purpose. So in terms of drafting and updating a new agreement, the Iranians started doing that. They shared it with the Russians, and for a period of about 2.5 years, there was multiple backs and forths, huge amounts of revisions and exchanges took place before finalizing the agreement. The agreement has now been finalized and will be signed, and I'll come on to the signing date shortly, because I think what we need to do is discuss some of the detail of what it contains, because it contains all aspects of bilateral relations, political relations, strategic relations in terms of in international geopolitical terms, collaborations in every economic sector you can imagine, even joint projects, of course, and provincial cooperation. So it's not just this sort of very ham-fisted way of going, here's a door into Iran or into Russia. It's going to be very specifically targeting areas. It also, clearly it's going to include energy. They're both big energy producers. So, and also that will involve collaboration in international trade and also with energy sectors. That's going to be extremely interesting, what that means in reality. Again, this is going to be something that is further going to become a more, I wouldn't say dominant sector in terms of energy, but Iran will certainly become more influential. It also wants to deal with modern technologies, peaceful nuclear energy. Yes, of course, defense and military cooperation has got everyone wondering quite what that means, because as we said way back in a previous podcast, the Iranians used S-400s against the Israelis. Everyone told us that wasn't true. Well, not everyone, but most people. Then the Iranians quietly admitted, yes, we do have S-400s. So in terms of military technology and the cooperation, you rightly make the point, Ken, about Iran providing drone technology to the Russians. This is a statement of fact, and that cooperation, of course, terrifies the West and particularly angers the Americans. They also, because the whole West Asia, the Caucasus, Central Asia, there's all the issue of combating terrorism. There's the development of the North-South corridor, which includes the Caspian Sea. And they want to deal with organized crime, anti-money laundering, and anything that potentially undermines the two countries. Now, Iran, of course, has signed agreements not that long ago with Belarus and North Korea, but no disrespect to the two countries, but it's very, very different. And there is a clause in it that refers to independence being a very important principle for Iran, something they've tried to uphold. Whether you agree or disagree with it, it's not the point, since 1979 and the revolution. And absolutely crystal clear, Iran and Russia share areas of convergence and are already partners in a whole range of fields. And the agreement's not going to be secret when it eventually comes out in a few days. Once, obviously, the government submits it to the Parliament of Iran for approval. Same thing will happen to the State Duma, but that's just rubber stamping, and that's exactly what happened with the previous agreement in 2001. Now, there is this question, what does Iran mean about territorial integrity? What is it saying? It's not like as though Russia's going to invade Iran. Of course, it's not, or vice versa. Yes, there was some comments made by someone in Russia regarding 3 Iranian islands in the Persian Gulf. But I think in reality, this has got nothing to do with the perspective of the Putin and the Kremlin and the Israelis, because the Iranians came out and said, look, there's an article in this agreement that includes respect for territorial integrity, and for Russia and ourselves will adhere to that 100%. I think this was just because somebody spoke out of turn or made some off-the-cuff comment. And it absolutely is clear they're not going to interfere in each other's countries. So it remains to be seen what these 47 articles are. Obviously, they will be approved, and Pezeshkian, who of course is now the Iranian president, visits Moscow on the 18th of this month. He's going to meet with Putin and other, probably Lavrov, etc., other Russian officials. They'll sign this comprehensive strategic cooperation agreement. And then we'll see how the United States particularly reacts to this. And they're saying the timing has got nothing to do with Trump's inauguration. I think it absolutely has. I think they timed it so basically it would come in right at the back end when Biden's basically out the door. So there's nothing that's going to be done. They won't have time to react or do anything. But it'll be interesting to see how Trump reacts to this. And because, historically, as we know, during his first term, at the last minute, he decided very intelligently not to launch a preemptive strike on Iran. I don't think or expect that will happen again, but he's got to also deal with the Israelis and their perspective on Iran and how that's going to unfold in the future. But it would make far more sense for the United States to start to cooperate and work with the Iranians. But this agreement shouldn't be underestimated. It has huge gravity and importance. It will go a long way to protect the interest of the Iranians, as does the Chinese one. Okay, to a lesser extent, but there is some mileage in signing agreements with Belarus. North Korea, I'm not really sure what the point of that was, particularly. Maybe it's just a symbolic gesture to the West. Maybe it's more about what Iran could have provided to North Korea militarily than anything else. But this is an important development. It's worthy of discussion. The details will put flesh on the bones because there's no doubt there is a fear in the West that this could result in Article 5 kind of arrangement between the Iranians and the Russians. There was kind of almost a little subtle hint about that, but that could have just been thrown in to be, just for the sake of throwing in. It doesn't have any basis in reality from either the Iranian or Russian perspective, but the military cooperation absolutely is, and security. And this is clearly a hugely important comprehensive agreement purpose built for the next 25 years and beyond with these two countries. They're very strong allies. They will go into work together, and this will go a long way, hopefully, to try and secure better peace, better relations also in the whole of West Asia, because Iran is going to be an important partner in that region, whether Israel likes it or not. And for the United States, it's far better to have Iran back on side. There are mutterings that the JCPOA may be resurrected. I would be a little bit surprised if that happens with the Trump administration, but who knows? But let's see what unfolds in the future. But not a lot of people are talking about this, but it is extremely important, and why we've discussed it today.
Absolutely. And I think one final thing to make a point about is this type of agreement is something that Russia has been wanting to do with Turkey, with a number of different countries. Same way with China over in Asia with the ASEAN group. Is the potential for West Asia to just emerge itself as a whole into being this power in the 21st century. And because of the fact that the West still has tentacles into the Syrias, the Turkeys, the Qatars of the world, etc., and of course, from Israel's point of view, wanting to not, they certainly don't want to see a unified Middle East. That is not to their benefit. So with Russia getting involved in joining in, and of course the corridor that's being built, many of the other things that's going on in Eurasia, something Azerbaijan and Armenia is something that has to be addressed down the road. But Japan is even starting to put feelers into, to China to break away from Western hegemony. You're seeing Eastern Europe countries that are wanting to do this. Many of the governments that are evolving or emerging in France, Germany, etc., they want to have better relations, not just with Russia, but with West Asia, and get rid of this. So I think we could potentially, as this goes along over the next few years, an agreement like this and the development and the actual results that come from it could see a domino effect from a lot of U.S. controlled and Western controlled vassals or states that have been under chaos from a lot of internal struggles, suddenly finding themselves wanting to latch upon these major powers in the multipolar world. And, it all depends on what happens, I think, starting with Iran and Russia. Paul, anyway, I want to thank you as always for being a part of this great discussion, for your insights in regards to this.
Yes, and likewise.
And to everybody at the Sirius Report community, thank you very much for your support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, send this out to anybody you think it might be important. And until the next time we get together, have a great day.